Are we able to start? Yeah. So this is a shiur in the Sefer Tanya Ch, Perik Gimel, and we are present on the 14th page of the printed Sefer. And today is Yom Rishon, Ur Yom Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Gimel, Shvat, Toshin Ayin Beis. So we were talking about the Koiches HaNefesh that we saw. Perik Gimel devoted itself to talking about the Esa Koiches of the Nefesh, which were Mishtalshel from the Esa Spheres Elyones, and we saw they're divided into two Ikar, principal categories of Seichel and Midat. And we saw that the Seichel was Koil in itself, Chochma Bina V'das, and the Midas we saw were Ava, Ufachat, V'yira, and that they were produced and literally born, caused to be born by the Chochma Bina Das Shebanefesh, but not that they were produced entirely by the Moichin, which are Chochma Bina V'das, but they were caused to be born because they really exist in the Nefesh. The purpose of the Seichel is to bring them out and reveal them and show them the way, literally, to be a guiding line and more than a guiding, like a prompting line to the Midas, showing them in what direction and according to what rules and according to what limitations, etc., they should be born out. And so that what we saw was the function of the Seichel, Beneged to the Midas. And then we began the Biyur Inyan, and we saw that there was such a thing which we called the Nefesh Maskeles. We saw that the Nefesh was so united and so essential was the Koyach of the Moichin, the Koyches of Chochma Bina to the Nefesh, that the Nefesh can be called on their name, and the Nefesh, generally speaking, is called Nefesh Maskeles. However, we saw that the word Maskil, Maskeles, is born from the word Maskil, and we saw that it was a causative form of the verb, meaning the power to produce a thing called Chochma. And we saw that the power to produce and to prompt mind to have an idea, that's called Maskil, from the causative form of the verb. And we saw that that's what we might call the inner power of Chochma, and it was called Koyach Ma. And the reason being that the word Koyach Ma is two syllables, Koyach and Ma, are like two contradictory almost syllables. The word Koyach means an expressive power, and the word Ma means something which is indefinable and still in a state of complete nullification. It's asking what? It's asking upwards. What is it, or what am I, etc., meaning the bittul completely without yet understanding. And koyach already implies something which is functioning in a definitive and direct and defined oifen. So therefore, we described that was referring to a general power in the mind, which we call the mind, or the koyach hamaskil in Hebrew. But that is it's albeit legabi the pshita, the simplicity of the essential part of the soul, the essential level of the nefesh, which is higher than the koyach. It's already called a koyach, but its whole inyan is complete bittul. And therefore, you only know that you have a koyach hamaskil. You can't really define it, or you don't really know even how it functions. You just have this deep, all-enveloping power of the mind, which produces a individual and defined seichel, being as it is completely beyond anything individual. It's just about an all-enveloping power which produces specific concepts to the mind. And those specific concepts, they're called the beginning of the revelation to the mensch of the Koyach HaChochma, and they're called the Borak HaMavrik, how do you call it, the lightning flash. That's what we see when a mensch, as we described in the previous class, when a mensch has been struggling and putting in a lot of effort to understand, and he hasn't quite made it, then all of a sudden he gets what we call a Borak HaMavrik, a lightning flash, which flashes into his mind, and he gets the thing in a albeit intense nakuda, how do you call it, an intense dot of powerful understanding, but it's indefined yet, or undefined in his mind, and his whole power of seichel, and he's not able to describe it in detail, but he feels within himself that he's got the real point, he's got it. And from now on, it's only a question of developing and bringing that into full expression. So that's the Indian of the Borak HaMavrik. So we see that that Koyach HaMaskir, the general power to produce seichel, that's called Koyach Ma. That is the ability of the mind to produce unlimitedly, because we see that a mensch doesn't become tired from that. If he produces more than one seichel, it's not the pshat that his Koyach HaMaskir has become weary because it's produced seichel. He may be bodily weary, but not his Koyach HaSeichel. It can produce unlimited, almost without end, any forms of seichel to him which he has not yet understood. And that's the union of Koyach Ma. However, now we go on to Kushamoitzi, Koichoi, El Hapoyo, Shemizbeinain Besichloi, Lahovin Dovali Ashuroi, Uli Amkoi, Mitoich Eze Dvar Chokma, Amuskal Besichloi, Nikro Bina. And now we're moving over from the power of Chokhmah into the realm of understanding, which we're going to call Bina. So he says that this state of Chokhmah, the Koyach HaMaskil, Koyach Ma, has produced him a flash of an idea. And that's the union of the Borak HaMavrik, as it's called in Chassidus. When he takes that now, Moitzi Koichoi El Hapoyo, when he takes the potential power, but here the word koyach is being used in a slightly different way than what it was used a word prior to that in koyach ma, because the word koyach in koyach ma meant a specific defined entity which is functioning in its own definable terms. The word koyach can have another meaning. That can mean a potential state, that everything which is potential and not yet expressing itself, and not yet giving out what's inherent in or hidden within itself, well, that's called potentiality or potential koyach. Therefore, we can say a thing is bekoyach but not bepoil. In Lashon Kodesh, it's usable. Even in modern Hebrew, you can say something is potential but didn't become active. It didn't become active yet. So in the same way, we can talk about the Koyach HaChochma being in a state of potentiality, but it brings that potentiality into an activity. And that's what we're referring now to the Borak HaMavrik, to the lightning flash. Up to now, Koyach Ma has been talking about the Koyach HaMaskil. However, when he brings out from that Koyach HaMaskil, he brings from the high potential state that all the ideas are there in that mind, or that Koyach HaMaskil, and he brings it from that state of potentiality, El Hapoyo, into activity. In other words, that's already the Borak HaMavrik. It's already come out into something. Yeah. But now he brings it, where's he going with it? What's he going to do with that? He's brought it out now, and something has appeared to him, and he got a lightning flash, and he feels he understands it, and he's got it clearly, and what's he going to do now? So we see the next step is, he's mizboinen still within the realm of the Koyach HaChochma. Seichel, as we saw, is the name for the Koyach HaChochma. Generally speaking, he's already using an activity in his mind to a deliberate activity on the part of the Adam to make that potentiality of the lightning flash, make it come down and express itself and enter another theater of his mind whereby he'll be able to understand it. So the word mizbeinen is referring to that activity. And we're going to see that the word mizbeinen also has in itself two implications. We can say that it's from the word bina, basically speaking. It's from the word bina. What bina means to understand or appreciate something. Mizbeinen means that you take bina and you affect it, because that's a reflective verb. That is called a reflexive verb. You're acting towards yourself. Mizbeinen means where you take something and you turn it over in your mind like towards yourself. In other words, you become busy with it in a way that you want to make it your personal thing, not just a profound idea which is flashed at you, but you want to bring it into your experience and make it a personal thing which you'll be able to understand in a personal way. And that's called mizbeinen. So we see that the izboninus by a person consists of two inyonim. That maybe just this is the place to mention briefly that why we call chokhmah a from ma, we call it a from bittel, because essentially the koyach chokhmah is not so much you. The koyach chokhmah is what you are given milmaila. In other words, you are a receiver, and you're completely what's called in the Lashon HaKodesh a makabel. You're just a receiver, and the mind, or the etzem hanefesh even, prompts into you something, and you receive it. In other words, you are completely nullified. You have no essential being of your own, and you're lifting upwards towards what the nefesh will give you. And that's what we saw, that the koyach ha-chokhmah, the koyach ha-maskil in its state of koyach ma, it functions in a way that it drops you, it, as it were, gives you an idea, and you're sort of like waiting, you're requesting entity, waiting for that to be dropped into your mind. When it does drop into your understanding on your seichel, well, that's called a baruch ha-mavrik. Oh, but that's already the beginning of the understanding. You've already got some idea what you get. You know, you understand it, but it's just undefined in your mind. It's also not ordered in sentences or in ideas. It's just an essential thing. So now what you've got to do now is you've got to bring that into a realm where you'll be able to relate to that personally and understand it in a detailed way. So that is called hizbonenus in the noun, mizbeinen in the verb. So what does mizbeinen do? Mizbeinen takes that lightning flash and brings it down and persuades it, in other words, brings it to come down to another area of your mind or of your general ability to rationalize, and that's called seichel. So mizbeinen, you're at the beginning, you're still mizbeinen b'sichloi, meaning the essential power of chokhmah. All we can say that the word sichloi here is being used just in a general way. He's mizbeinen in his, but you're only mizbeinen in what you've been given by the seichel. So maybe the seichel b'sichloi is like an expression saying that you're taking that power to reflect and to turn things over in your mind in such a way that you're trying to make it come down there from the state of seichel, in order that you will be lahovin dover liashure ula omke, that you now bring it to a realm in your seichel where you will understand it, and you've acted in such a way that you oblige that baruch hamavrik to come down. Because we can imagine a person having a flash of an idea. We can imagine having a baruch hamavrik, and then just saying, well, that was nice, and just say, I don't really have any power anymore, and I forget about it. Just, go ahead with his life. And he would always say, well, I got the idea, but I don't really know much about it. I didn't have the power to go into it. I wasn't able or prompted to get to the depth of the matter, etc. Remember, there's a deliberate act on the part of the mensch to bring it down into a level where it will be, and that's why the mizbeinain begins, the concept of hizbonanus, of this reflecting within yourself. Well, that begins when it's still in chokhmah. And what do? You bring that down in such a way, lahovin. You bring it into an area of your general rational power, which is given to you by Hashem to understand. Lahovin dover liashure ulionkoy. Liashure is a word to give a certification to somebody's called an ishur. Ashure means you understand it in its correctness and its certification, and you begin to define. Maybe we should say that you define and conceptualize correctly what you understood, what you got in the lightning flash of the Chokhmah. You bring it now down into Lahovin, and what do? Lahovin dovali ashure in a correct and certified way, and then uli omkoi. Then you go into depth of it. Now, we could suggest that the omkoi is also referring to a certain power within your ability to understand. First we got lahovin, then you got that the lahovin should be ashurei, which means that in Bina you begin to define the matter, and you begin to differentiate it from other ideas, so that you don't get confused and mix it up with some other concept which would be incorrect. Therefore, there's an inyan of certification and rectification in the power of Bina, which sorts this out like every other inyanim, and answers questions and inquiries and even kashyas, things of that nature, in order that it shouldn't become a vulbal with other ideas. And then you have li omkoi. In other words, li ashura is like the definition and the bringing to its right status the idea. And then la omkoi is a different thing. It's put down and said that after you've understood a thing in a lot of detail, you've defined it and you've got it clear, and it's all made good sense in reference to other ideas, and you've got it pretty clear, then there's a power on the part of the Koach HaBina which takes it all back and sums it up. Have you ever seen somebody who can sort of define a whole idea, and then somehow he has the ability to just put it in a brief, what's called summary or a synopsis, to summarize it in a few words what it's all about. And so it's brought down on citizens that's a very profound depth of the seichel to do a thing like that. Because in order to sum up a whole series of details which make an idea and to express them in a very limited but somehow or another tremendously illuminating and informative few words, summarize them and synopsize them like that, that's a very profound power. And that's called oimek habina, and that's called sometimes in Chassidus the nakudas hatamtzis, the dot of the essential essence. A tamtzit is like when you make tea and you put it in, and then you just put in a small amount of boiling water, and so all the tea seeps into a very profound essence. Like people make tea essence on Shabbos, you remember tea essence. Well, that's called a tamtzit. So anything which is essentially taken the whole thing and put it into a profound brevity, like what it really is or could be in quantity, well, that's called a tamtzit. Nakudas hatamtzit means that you put it all in a nakuda. You can say out in 2 or 3, or 1 or 2 sentences, a huge concept. Well, that's called omke. In other words, we've gone through now bina, first of all, a hovin, just to understand. And what's the point about lahovin? Lahovin is that you bring it already to yourself. Because you can't say, ani mevin, you can't say in Lashon Kodesh, I understand, unless you have become somewhat involved in the matter. Understanding means that you personally become involved. When you get this Baruch HaMavrik from Chokhmah, like a lightning flash, then you are not involved, as we pointed out before. You're just a makabel. mind in a general way is giving you that idea. Now, to understand, you become personally active and you become involved in the matter. Otherwise, it's not shy to say lahavin. And then you define it. Shure means you define it and you certify it and you bring it into all those activities to try and make clear what it's all about and what are the details of the matter. Then li'omkoi is the returning of Bina back into itself to express it all in a very brief way to the Adam himself. Okay, how do you live with a concept that you understood correctly? You can't live with it the whole time with all the discussions and all the kashas and terutzim that were there. You know, you've got to have it in a profound, essential statement in your mind. So that's what happens with Bina, that it comes back to that. And in Emerson, it's brought down in Chassidus, that's a form of a scholars of the koyach HaChochmah inside the koyach HaBina. It's like going back to a nakuda, but it's not the same nakuda that you started off with. It's a different type of nakuda, but it's like a form of it's called in the Sefer Yetzirah, it's called Chacham Babina, the power of the infant Chacham inside Bina. But we won't go into that, that's a deep opinion, but suffice to say, that's the infant Leomkoi. Mitoich, where did you get all this? You got it from Mitoich, from Eza Dvar Chochmah, some matter of Chochmah that was muskal, that had been already grasped, besikloi. What that's already referring to? Chochmah. In other words, what have you been doing, all these activities, was something that you got from Chochmah. In other words, it began with Chochmah, and there it was muskal, was understood. You're over there, you're a makabel bi'ikar, and what you've done, you've taken that down, and we notice that it's mitoich, the altar is it's from within something that you understood. Now that could be a hint in the altar of his Lashon that the original Baruch HaMavrik, which appears to you, or maybe we could say the original idea even before the Baruch HaMavrik, which can also be described, is so profound that what you understand of Bina is only mitoich, it's only from within that. It's not really the whole ultimate profundity. And it's only very, very great chachamim that they understand the ultimate profundity of every nakuda which is given to them. And that's called a choyach, a chacham, be'etzem koyach chochmasei. Of somebody who's not on such a level, then his union of understanding is mitoich ez devar choch. He's sort of taking it from within, or taking out part of it. And the devar chochma hamuskal, which was understood, besichloi, or that power to do all that is nikro bina, or that power lahovin, liashura, from that which was already begun in the koyach hachochma, or that's called bina. V'hein, heim, of the aim, and they are the parentage points. They are the father and the mother. In other words, Chochmah is the father, legabi you, because we saw legabi itself. It's a mekavo. It's not a father. It's just a receiver. But legabi, the power of Bina and the power of you working with that, then it's the beginning. So it's the father. So he said they are av v'aim. Now Bina is called the mother. It's well known. Ima Eloi. In the Zohar Kodesh is Ema, or Aim, meaning that Bina is just like the mother receives the essential hashpah from the father, and then she develops on it and brings about all the development of the embryo inside the womb and so on. So he said they are the Av Aim, or these two powers of Chochmah and Bina. They are the Av Aim Hamoylidois Avos Hashem V'yirosei Upachtoi. Or they are the what give birth to. As we said before, they give birth to Avos Hashem V'yirosei Upachtoi. They give rise to love of Hashem, awe of Him, and dread, as we might call in Yiddish, Shrek. How do you say, dread, a sort of a simple fear for your own materials, as it were. Yira is not so much a fear, but yira is like an awe, where you are completely swept away by the greatness of Hashem, Pachad is where you fear him, lest you might in some way interfere with the unbelievable greatness and majesty and kingship of Hashem. And therefore, Pachad is a lower level, more shy to the heart, and we'll see later that Yira is a little bit more shy to the brain. Anyway, he said, they give birth, Chokhmah Bina, they are the parents, the Ov or Aim, they give birth to Avos Hashem, V'yirosei, Upaktoi. Ki, HaSeichel, Shebenefesh HaMaskeles. Already in from Chokhmah, we said that Seichel is referring to Chokhmah. Seichel, which is in the Nefesh HaMaskeles, it's so united with the union of Chokhmah that the Nefesh itself is called the Nefesh HaMaskeles. When he's Mizboinen, when he brings it out into Bina, as we saw before, he makes an effort to bring it down and then he reflects on it in Bina. Umamik Ma'id, and he goes very deep in it. Now here we see puts in the word Ma'id. So here we see this, there's a power in Bina where you become very deepened in the matter. You become tremendously involved in the details in a way that you go in, and this expression of the Nekudas Atamsis and the power to sum things up becomes very, very deepened and very. So here we could say even before you reach the Nekudas Atamsis that you're deeply involved in the matter. Now, that's possible even in Bina. Even in Bina, you become tremendously committed to the matter, and therefore you take it in all its detail in such a way that you keep seeing a deeper idea. And that's what we see, that the power of Bina has got three dimensions to it, what are called al Chassidus Oirech, Reichev, Ve'oimek. Now, for example, Oirech is like the length of Bina. And that's how you have the ability to go down and down and down from a high level of understanding, and then usually this is in a way of trying to bring more into Gilui, what you understood. You have the ability of bringing that down into an example or a parable or some way of explaining it in a slightly more simple way, and then you can go down even further, and you can go down even further to make it understandable to your listener. Somebody who's listening to it, you can sort of go down and down and down and show it to him on a more simple level. Or that's called oirech, that's called the length. And sometimes that happens even for yourself, that you try to find a way of expressing it in a more simple and in a more understandable way to yourself, and therefore you draw the seichel down literally into a longer series of ideas which make it more applicable to yourself and later to a listener and to a Talmud or a Makabel or whoever it may be. That's called oirech. Now, reichev is this idea we spoke about before, where you expand it and you see all the detail and you ask all the questions and you answer all the kashyas and you see how it relates to other ideas and things. Now, oimek is a slightly different idea. Oimek is like we saw before, a moving and effort on the part of the understander to become more and more and more acquainted with the depth and the profundity that there is in this matter, in a way that he'll eventually see this thing and appreciate it in a much more summing up and synoptical way, that he'll have it clear, so clear that he'll be able to. And why does he do that? Because it bothers him very much, and he's very concerned, and he's very anxious, and very committed. And therefore the Alter puts in here that if you want to really produce midas, then you have to be mamik ma'id. In other words, it's not a how do you call it, laying on a sofa with a cigar business. This whole business of Chokhmah Bina V'das, how it is according to Siddur, it's not laying out on a bench. I suppose in a yeshiva would be laying on a bench. Belpatish Shtub would be laying on a sofa. But in both cases, just with a cigar or a cigarette or even how do you call it, an imaginal such one, where you're just taking it easy and having a good time. You're not going to make it to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem and Pachtoi and all these in Yodim. You might have a little bit of an idea what the guy spoke about during the class. Now, what are we after? We're after ma'amik me'oid, that you've got to really get into it in an ability to define it clearly to yourself and to bring it to a point where you can talk about it in a few words, as it were, and you can know what you've got. And that's the union of depth, me'oid. That's not to be, it could be, some people understand that that's already a hint and a reference to what the Alter Rebbe called das before. And that's a new power in the nefesh which we're going to meet up with shortly in this parak, the koyach hadas. So it could be that that's also true, because das is the power to commit yourself and to bind yourself over to the matter, to make it part of your own life, in the real sense that you live and feel in the brain what you understood. So this ma'amik me'oid could be a hint and a throw at the union of das. But most people say that even in Bina there's this power, as we pointed out, of understanding. But ma'oid means, very, very much so, that that's a sign. Ma'oid means much. You know, how do you call it? It's put down. The people say that the word ma'oid means that wherever you hold, much more than that. That's what ma'oid means. Ma'oid doesn't have any limits. Ma'oid's like an unlimited expression. Therefore we say, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol miyodecha. Chassidus explains that that's the bli gvul by a person. As much as a limited person can have unlimitedness, but that's hinted in the word ma'oid. In other words, a sort of unconditional commitment. You know, you just into it. Ma'amik ma'oid. What is the ma'amik ma'oid? In what? B'gedulas Hashem, in the greatness of the Eibishter. Eich hu mamalei kol almin v'seivu kol almin v'kula kamei kaloi chashivei. So in what is he mizbeinen or ma'amik ma'oid? In the greatness of the Eibishter. So you might say, well, greatness of the Eibishter, Shalom Aleichem. I mean, what is the greatness of the Eibishter? In what way do I appreciate the greatness of Hashem? So the Alter Rebbe tells you do it in 3 levels, each one higher and incomparably more elevated or abstracted than the other. And he said, what's the first one? Eichu mamalei, how he actually fills up all of the worlds. Mamalei kol almin. Now, mamalei kol almin means how the Eibishter enters every created being in the form of a light which shines literally into a kli, almost, as you might say, and it enters in what we call hitlabshut. It enters itself and puts itself on inside the thing and gives it a oyer and a chayis, what we call bepnimius of the union. That's called Mamalekol. So now we have to, it immediately presents itself to the intelligent reader that must be a limited in some way. Because to enter every being according to his level and according to whatever he is, and literally give him life force and give him powers of understanding and feeling and all those things that created beings have, well, that involves the concept of tzimtzum on all sorts of different levels, you know, relative tzimtzum from one level to the other. So that's referring to a light which has got some sort of a connection to the worlds. Whatever it's called, mamalei kol almin. But however, he said the next great level upwards is v'seivei kol almin, that the Eibush is also completely, transcendent to all of the worlds. He's beyond and around. In other words, he's so great that he can't enter into any of the created entities, or even the highest of all the worlds. He can't enter any of them in a way, in a panemius. He can only just be present in them, but not enter into them. So he's there in everywhere, the Ur He's not just somewhere upstairs, or the Ur is everywhere, but he doesn't enter into knowledgeable and feelable union with the thing that he is affecting. And therefore, he affects the Savior affects in what we call an outward way. Even though there's no outward and there's no inward in the normal sense, but not in inward like Mamalik Almin does, but in a transcendent and withdrawn way. So that's a very high level in divine light. However, and that's really the Ike Chayas of everything, because that produces everything, Yesh Ma'ayin. However, that's called Soivev Kol Almin, which means that it's also got some distant and some very, very completely distant and insignificant, but nonetheless significant, relation to the world. In other words, it's meant to be Soivev, completely abstracted and transcendent, but it's got a certain limit, or how do you call it, yachas, relationship, al-minat. It's Soivev Kol al-minat. It's also got something to do with the world. And now, says the Alter Rebbe, there's another madrega, v'kula kamei kaloi chashivei. There's a divine light which everything in front of him is like to nothing. So we might say, well, Soivev Kol al-min also. Soivev Kol al-min is the makif, it's an all enveloping light. So it really doesn't really have much relation to the infinite, but it does, because it's still somewhere or another Soivev Kol al-min. It's just that it relates to them in a very distant and abstract way. Of a kula kamei chaloi chashivei means that everything is like that light, just like his foot weren't there. Kaloi chashivei like is reckoned like to nothing. In other words, that's what we call Soivev in Chassidus. That's what we call Soivev Amiti, genuine Soivev, which is completely and utterly withdrawn even from Soivev Kol Almin, and everything there is just like it's not there. In other words, Soivev, or what is Kol Almin, it recognizes and brings about to a certain extent the world. There's another madrega where everything just has no existence whatsoever. Kula kamei chaloi ashivei. So the Alter Rebbe says you've got to be mizbein on three different levels. First of all, on Mamale, then you go up to Soivev, then you go up to a level of Kula kamei chaloi chashivei. There's no world at all. Nothing is really there. Everything is batel legamri. And if you misbein in that way, then Neil Dov and his that becomes born and it becomes awakened. Midas yiras harimamas b'moichoi. It becomes aroused, the characteristic of the fear of the elevation, the fear of the laudation and wondrousness of Hashem. B'moichoi makshavtoi, and in his makshava, liro, to have awe, and his boishesh, literally to be ashamed of the greatness of the Eibusher, in la sofa tachlit. There's absolutely no end and no finality to it whatsoever. So he says that the first thing that happens is after you've been misbeinen, the first thing that happens is Nisoiroro, that becomes awakened, V'nildor, and that becomes literally born in your brain. Yiras Hashem, V'moichei V'makshavtoi, the awe of the Eibishter. And he said, what sort of awe is that? Yiras HaRimamas, the awe of the laudatory elevation of Hashem, the unbelievable complete elevation of the Eibishter, and that's in your moyach and in your machshava, and you become almost ashamed of yourself. You sort of say, I'm just a little nothing, and I'm just a worthless little thing that I'm, you feel how you're just absolutely, you're a shameful little dot that has no significance, and the bit of significance you do have, you're messing it all up anyway. Therefore, you got what to be ashamed about. As therefore, you had to call it misboishesh, a big to us. So, everybody asked a kasha, and here we come with the famous kasha. And with that, we'll leave you guys to have your evening supper. Because if you eat your evening supper with a kasha, then maybe you'll eat it a bit more detached than what you would have eaten at home. What's the kasha? We just said before, at the beginning of the parak also, we said the midas that come out of the brain are avos Hashem, yiras Hashem, upakli. Right? And here we say that the first thing that happens is yiras Hashem. If you look at another couple of lines later, you'll say, after this yira, then you get to ava. No, isn't that isn't that the other way around? It doesn't seem to be a bit problematic. So it is, but it isn't. It is, but it isn't. And here's a very, very fascinating point, which we're going to see. It's a very interesting thing I saw in our sefer last night, a very big Polish God, and he writes that the first thing you have to have is Yiras Hashem, and then afterwards Ahava, and this guy writes footnotes at the bottom, and he says, but usually we talk about Ahava first and then Yira. What is he saying, Yira first and then Ahava? And he brings a whole series of Sfarim and his Mefalpur and this, but he doesn't mention the Tanya, so I'm very tempted to write him a letter, so you should take a look in Perek Gimel of Tanya, and you'll see over there, it's also like that, Yira first and then Ahava, not Ahava first and Yira. Anyway, I'll leave you to reflect on that, Kasha, during your supper, and I won't disturb your sleep, and I hope you'll have a good evening, and Be'ez Hashem, we want Moshiach now.